Some greetings and announcements, if I can, everybody, so we can start the service this morning. You've had a chance to meet Michelle, and she's going to be doing the share next time we gather. And a couple of sad things. Many of you know for years and years and years, Odalis Rodriguez had her dog with her, and her dog passed away unexpectedly to this week. Many of you remember Ed Johnson, who would sit here in the big chair, and he passed away suddenly this week too. So it's been very sad. I've known Ed since 1970, and he was in my first congregation in Saugus, so I extend to him and his sisters, and but at least, and I said to this, and his family is grateful that it was in his sleep and without any pain and all the rest of that. So, but it was unexpected. I will send you the calendar. We've got a lot coming up. Let me just remind everybody, Michelle will be with us on the 27th. On Palm Sunday, we'll have a special meeting of the congregation to see if we can formally have Michelle a part of us. Then we come Easter, and Easter plus one, Besa will be with us. So we are beginning to implement a gradual, how do we share and keep our future going together with mutuality, respect, and trust. I never want to mention this, but I would appreciate if people would give. We never talk about money because it's my fault. I have a phobia about that, but giving has been a bit slow. People ask why PayPal. PayPal doesn't charge us anything. Everybody else charges us a chunk. That's why we use PayPal. Or you can send it to the post office box. But we're a little low, so if you guys could help in, we deeply, deeply appreciate it. You know, I don't mention money. You know that. Michelle mentioned pastoral care. Do let me say that this past couple of weeks have been a lot of pastoral care. Congregations, frankly, aren't worth a hoot if they don't offer it. It's nice to have great worship services. It's nice to have great music. It's nice to have some terrific shares. But the reality is, when stuff happens, if you don't have the care of the people you're with, then the people you're with aren't worth it. And that's especially true for congregations. So as we think about that, you don't need what happened to Judy Homer the other night. Judy Homer called me and I was overtired and got cranky. You don't need that. So I had to apologize to Judy to say, I'm sorry for being cranky. She says, you're tired. I said, yes, you don't need that. What you need is good pastoral care. So we need to be sure we keep up with that. We keep up with that. So again, we're glad to have Michelle with us this morning and her companion, who will be drumming, bringing some drum music with us next time as well. And let us continue then by starting the service with the memorial candle in memory of all of those innocent civilians who are being killed as we speak in Ukraine. And let us remember all of those who are taking in strangers they've never met and opening their arms. You've seen people, there was that picture of that little boy who had a phone number and he went all by himself hundreds of miles. So let us remember refugees, and let us remember the innocents, and let us remember those who have died innocently through no fault of their own. Our introit, if you would, Donald. 2 teenagers. Whoa. Talk about feeling, what was I doing at that age? If you'll join me with a call to worship for those of you who wish, and Donald, if you would pull it up for us. And those of you who wish, if you'd read it with me together. Eternal light, shine into our hearts. Eternal goodness, deliver us from evil. Eternal love, be our support. Eternal wisdom, scatter our ignorance. Eternal mercy, have mercy on us, that with heart and mind and soul and strength, we may seek and find your divine presence. That is adapted from Alcuin of York, writing centuries and centuries and centuries ago. And for those of you who wish, if you would read the following with me. Teach my heart healing words. Show me the words that help rather than harm. Instruct me in the verbs that bring energy, the nouns pointing to the real, the adjectives describing your subtleties. Reveal to me how words can be offered in a way that connects rather than separates, that develops trust and eschews suspicion, that opens the heart and relaxes the mind. Amen. Music is healing. We're going to ask Michelle if she'd read the first reading for us.
Of course. Today's first reading is from Reverend Jane Malden. Torn and confused, lonely and enraged, we greet the new day with suspicion. Spirit of life, show us the gate to healing. May we find in our hands the tools to craft a way through the pain. When even these tools fail us, may other hands reach out. Let us welcome them and know them as your hands, gently holding us, keeping us from collapse, shaping us and molding new strength until we are ready to try again. Amen.
We're going to ask if Michelle would lead the responsive reading. She'll read the small lettered, and I will lead us in the indented caps.
Only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer sorrow.
But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heals them.
Don't ever discount the wonder of tears.
They can be healing waters in a stream of joy. Sometimes they are the best words the heart can speak.
Just like there's always time for pain,
There's always time for healing. And if you would again, Michelle.
The next reading is from the Gospel of Matthew. Come to me, all of you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Our next reading comes from Rumi, Sufi poet. Sorrow prepares you for joy. It violently sweeps everything out of your house so that new joy can find space to enter. It shakes the yellow leaves from the bough of your heart so that fresh green leaves can grow in their place. It pulls up the rotten roots so that new roots hidden beneath have room to grow. Whatever sorrow shakes from your heart, far better things will take their place.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. As we gather this morning, may the divine in me greet and embrace the divine in you. As once again, we share together questions, hopes, fears, doubts, and affirmations of life itself. Amen. Our Lenten themes, and I'm not sure how we arrived at this, came out to be forgiving, healing, acceptance, and renewal. Today, we're talking about healing. And since Michelle has a doctorate, she will probably wince when she sees what I'm going to do now. And if Larry Deitch is here, he will too. You're not supposed to digress when you begin a sermon. It's bad form. So I'm going to do it anyway. I'm always fascinated by when you and I hear about Taoism and the way it started. How did it start with shamans healing, touching and doing things? We're fascinated by Native Americans as they did moss, healing and touching and other kinds of things. I won't even get into peyote and other kinds of healing and touching. We won't get into, as Reza Aslan pointed out in his book, Zealot, Hani the circle drawer. You never heard of him, neither did I, lest I appear to be so knowledgeable. And his sons, Abba and Hanan, you never heard of them, but they were like famous in the day. And Apollinaris of Tyana was the healer of all time, and they all lived contemporary with Jesus. Nobody, by the way, knew squat about Jesus, ever heard about Jesus, but they all knew about Hani the circle drawer, Apollinaris of Tyana, Taoism, healing all over the place. It's fine, it's accepted. But as soon as we read about Jesus touching and healing, everybody has a fit. Drama everywhere. We have to embarrass ourselves. Oh, that's so embarrassing. We don't talk about that. How does that, why do we do that? And by the way, lest anybody here feels embarrassed, I did the same thing. I read these healing stories and I think this is embarrassing. This does not go with my modern, my modern understanding of life and the way things are. Of course, this is when I was in seminary, which was about the time dirt appeared on the planet. And it was very Teutonic and very Northern European, and we had everything just so, and everything had to make sense, and everything was rational. By God, it will be rational, and German if we can, with a tint of English thrown in. And that's the way it was. So this healing didn't fit in the box, but it was okay that everybody else did this, but Jesus was not allowed to do this. Sorry, a digression. So we begin with healing, and oddly enough, as Unitarians, we start out with the Holy Trinity. I love that. Body, mind, and spirit. When we talk about the body, it hasn't changed. How about us physically? All of us. And one of the things I hate to tell everybody, as you get older, it is true. You're not 20 anymore. And you're going to find your body does not cooperate. By the way, I hope you have a great sense of humor about this. You're going to find, especially if you're on the computer, your pinky is going to cause you no end of trouble. I got a new gaming tower, which is way too fast. And as Gregory Bowe said to me, Kenneth, this is a bit overkill. You've got an AMD gaming processor, 7 with a 5500 series with 8 core. He says, you don't game. What are you doing with this thing? Well, I don't know what I was doing, but my pinky did. When you get older, you're going to find your pinky just kind of goes up and down. When your hand is on a mouse and your pinky goes up and down, guess what gets clicked unexpectedly? The mouse, and boom, everything takes off. You're going to find you don't heal as well. You're going to find your face changes. Grimmy, look at that nice face. You're 30. Yes, look at that nice face. No wrinkles, no jowls. I want you to know that once upon a time, I actually had a face. Look at, do you see, this thing came out over my collar today. What is this? Do you see this thing came out over trying to hook the collar up over my neck? I suddenly developed 2 Grand Canyons, not 1, but 2. I didn't have Grand Canyons. I had hair. Once upon a time, I used to race sailboats and had the surfing, bleach blonde hair. You know that guy? Yes, dudes, I did it. What's up? Now I look like an image of Pharaoh Khufu. If you don't believe me, go on the internet and look at Pharaoh Khufu, and you're going to see a face that looks like Khufu, who lived 4,200 years ago. Thank you very much. Moving along. Yes, your body gives out. Your mind. Do you all get emotional? Do you all ever get emotional, folks? Can we talk emotional? Ah! Yes. You cry at the drop of a hat. You get cranky. You get irritable. You don't know why things bother you and they do. Or suddenly you start crying again and you don't know why, and you never did that, especially men. Men are famous for this. Men stiff up. Yeah, but you're young, dude. Mark, you're young. You're young. He's mere 50. When you get older, folks, you have that. You'll be sitting there and suddenly like, woof, like, we weren't prepared for that. And then, there's the spiritual path. Whatever that may be, we need to talk about that in a minute. So you're talking about healing. How do you talk about healing with the body, mind, and spirit? And how do you bring them together when it's like herding cats? Have you ever noticed how your body and your mind and your spirit all go in different directions at the same time? Have you ever noticed that? And you wonder why you're having trouble healing. Well, your mind is thinking one thing, your body is definitely not cooperating, and somehow your spiritual path, you want to know, hello, you who I believe in. Like, why are you suddenly in Aruba when I need you here? And then how about healing with a family? some families are absolutely incredible. The civil wars that go on in families are absolutely legendary. And what do you do with relationships? What do you do with spouses? What do you do with boyfriends, girlfriends? Other, I put other because I don't know what categories to fit some people in. Other, does that work for everybody today? This is 2021. Used to have husband and wife or another bunch of courtesan, mistress, friend, whatever. And now we've got others because I'm not sure where you fit some people today. How do you deal with healing in those relationships? I tease my students because, you know, they've had no really social contact for 2 years. And, you know, that means that they're going to have socially awkward moments. Now they start dating again. Keep them in your thoughts and prayers. It's going to be a disaster and I'm going to miss it. When I was in the classroom, by the way, we used to have healing moments where I said, okay, who wants to share their socially awkward moment story of the day? It turns out people would share these absolute disasters and everybody would laugh and it'd be a moment of, we're all in this together. We're not being able to do that right now. What do you do? And we joke about this when somebody comes up and says to you, it's not you, it's me, and they leave. I mean, that's when you do, what do you do when you know you're feeling like, you know, on one half, you're feeling like you're absolutely destitute. Your soul is crushed. On the other hand, you're thinking homicide in many ways, very creative ways. Yes. How do you deal with all this in terms of healing? And let's not talk about political healing. If you live in Florida, we ask your prayers for us. We've got a reinstitution of the Inquisition. God forbid in Florida you mention the word gay or anything else. Gay, 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 gay. God forbid. God forbid. What about the United States, where we had a former president who is now, thankfully, to his shenanigans, stopped Ukraine from getting weapons that they desperately needed because they wouldn't give him dirt on a political rival who beat him by over 7 million votes. How do we ever deal with healing in that? And what about historical healing? To this day, Turkey does not acknowledge there was an Armenian genocide that killed up to 1.5 million people because they were Armenian. Hello? The Holocaust. We know Jews died in the Holocaust. Did you want to know why Poland was so concerned about the MiGs? 2 million Poles died in the Holocaust, and most of them were executed by, are you ready for this? Not the Germans, the Russians. 2 million. That's one of those figures that escapes everybody. What about the Koreas? How do we ever have healing between the Koreas? What about Ukraine? I could go on and on and on. And speaking about healing, what about medicine? And vaccines. You know, I had somebody get very mad at me this week. They really did, and it was probably half my fault. It's somebody who is very anti-vaccine, and I was accused of it. It was probably true, confession time. I was being disrespectful and not very helpful. And they started yelling at me so badly, I had to say, I'm sorry, you do not yell at me, and I had to hang up. What do we do about that? With people who genuinely are against vaccines, and I'm supposed to be a minister knowing that if I'm around somebody who doesn't vaccinate, I'm going to die. How do you heal that? I don't know. You see where I'm going with all this? It's like the word healing. We need to heal, but it's not as easy as you think. It's complicated, like forgiveness. Do you get this again? We mention these words. Everybody thinks they know what they mean, but how do you do this? How do you heal? How do you do that? I found, by the way, when I talk to my students about mental health and healing, I have found, I hope you'll like this, I cannot use the word therapy. You use the word therapy and students will blank. They will not do it. They absolutely freak out and think there is something wrong with them. Therapy will not work. But I came up with a new phrase, tune-ups. I said to my students, now dudes, this great professorial thing, dudes, I said, you tune up your car. Yeah, well, why don't you tune yourself up? They said, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I said, you get a tune-up for your car. And then somebody always says to me, what about you? Did you? I said, of course I had tune-ups. I said, you can't not go through having wiped out a career from alcoholism without tune-ups. You can't go out with divorces without tune-ups. You can't be anybody that's offering anything to anybody without, this is what we do. When I gave that last lecture at FIU, some of you may have forgotten, I was voted to give the last lecture at FIU. The first part of it was failure. And I talked about how failures are absolutely essential. And I said, you know, failures are how you grow up. It's how you learn. And you need some tune-ups. You need some therapy along the way. I said, I hope you don't think I got here this evening because everything went straight up and I was brilliant. I said, you've got to be kidding. Those of you who know me know I'm not brilliant at all. How I got here is an interesting combination of I don't know what, which I certainly did not get here because I was brilliant and I understood it all. I got here because I had some interesting failures. Art forms. We even titled the last lecture, Hyperactivity as an Art Form. I mean, seriously. So how do we deal with all of this stuff? And then how do we deal with chronic issues? Chronic issues are something that don't get enough press. You know, you talk about healing. I said, boom, it's done. You know, fine, you get a shot, you get therapy, you get this, and it's done. Well, guess what? For a lot of people, it's not done. It's not done. People say to me all the time, well, Kenneth, you're this, you're that. I said, I hope you don't think the heart transplant is done. I have to take medicine every day or it's not done. You all know that I'm an alcoholic. I have not had a drink in over 27 years. That's not done either. You constantly got to work at that. So there's some of us that have chronic issues. And, you know, people think, well, you've got it done. Some things just aren't done. Now, I have some thoughts. Number one, I hope nobody here is going through a health issue and think you're being punished. There is this thing in all religions that somehow people think if they've gotten a health problem, they're somehow being punished. Do you remember the phrase, what have I done so wrong to deserve this? What is really behind that? What have I done so wrong to deserve this? What is behind this is some kind of primitive idea that we are deserving what we got. Do let me suggest that if you believe in a God like that, you need to fire that God and go God shopping. Seriously, what kind of divine reality is going to do that to people? Number two, if you believe, now I played that song, Abide With Me. It has multiple meanings, but the idea behind that is if you say you believe in something, then why is it when we get sick, that's often the last thing we access? I don't care whether you're an atheist, an agnostic, Jewish, Christian, whatever that may mean, whatever any of that may mean, you all have something that grounds you. Everybody here has something that grounds you. One of the things I've observed is when people get sick, the last thing they access is what grounds them. Let me tell you something very clearly. Don't think I have survived a heart transplant for 34 years and alcoholism for all these years by doing it on my own. Now, maybe some of you can, but I certainly cannot. No matter what grounds you is what we should call upon first, not as an afterthought. The singer of that song, no matter what it is, abide with me. Things come, things go, that's the way it is, but whatever grounds me abides with me. It does not deserve me. Friends leave. Things change. Economics change. Your health changes. But whatever grounds you abides with you. That is a powerful thing, whatever it is that grounds you. So number one, we're not being punished. Number two, why do we access that which can ground us? Lastly, not firstly. Some observations. There are some things over which you and I have no control, and we need to be honest about that. None of us have controls about genes. Sometimes our genes work against us, and sometimes they work for us, and we have no control about it. Nobody comes out of the womb, pops out of the womb and says, welcome world, I want to cause all kinds of trouble. You know what I want to do? As soon as I hit a certain age, I'm going to become a roaring drunk and drive everybody nuts. That's my goal. Wee-ha! At the age of like one month. I mean, what baby does that? Seriously, who pops out of the womb? You have genes and things happen. Now, a funny thing about this is, those of you who've known me for a while know that I have a high metabolism. I spent most of grade school in detention because I couldn't sit still. I didn't have ADHD, but I couldn't sit still. In high school, I got thrown out of high school, not once, but twice, because I argued with a teacher because of my motor mouth. Twice I got thrown out. When I was in college, I got thrown out twice because of my motor mouth. That very famous class where the world history guy said the Protestant Reformation had nothing to do with religion. And I got him and said, you're out of your mind. He said, be respectful. And I said, be respectful. How could you say Protestant religion had nothing to do with religion? The two words are religious. What is wrong with you? We had this big argument. He said, you're out. So yes, these genes got me in detention and motor mouth like you can't believe, with all the trouble. So why am I alive? Because those very genes metabolize the toxicity of the heart medicine I'm taking so I wouldn't die. And I had no say about any of that. No say whatsoever. Sometimes our genes work for us. Sometimes they work against us. We have no say about it. And we have no say about the diseases we got. Nobody here says, hey, you know what I want to do? Is I want to have a gene where I get mentally depressed, every 6 months. Who are volunteers for bipolar disorders? Who are volunteers for any of that? Nobody does. And we tend to forget that. There's no control over diseases we get, no control over genes we've got. We have no control over that. We need to stop beating ourselves up for that. It's not our fault. And by the same token, sometimes we have no access over good health care. And that's not our fault either. Sometimes we just don't. Some things we do have control over as we talk about healing. Attitude, number one. Everybody deserves poor me. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody deserves weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth. No problem with that. Everybody deserves that I need to go out to the garden and eat worms. That's fine. Then you got to stop. Enough already. Enough. Enough with the attitude. It's okay to be sad for a while. Stop. It's okay to feel sorry. Look at Sadie. Sadie wiped out her back legs and her spine. I immediately brought her into the vet. It was a freak accident. I was coming home from school. I opened the back door and she wanted to rush out to see me, and there was too much. Sadie, the door wasn't open. She clipped. I bring her to the vets, and the vet said to me, dogs like this don't live, Kenneth. We'll put her in overnight. We'll try to stabilize her. Come and see her the next morning. So I'm right there, and there's the face. I want to go home. Ready to go. And the vet said, the vet says, that doesn't look like a dog that's dying. I said, look at that face. He said, yeah, that face is somebody who wants to live. 7 years later, she's 12 and a half. You met Sadie. She's into everything. And what you didn't see is when she waxed the paw with her obnoxious 11-and-a-half-year-old cousin. No attitude except I live and I'm going through this. Attitude is something you can change. It's the difference between surviving well and being wretched and miserable and hurting yourself forever. You can change that. Yes, you can go out to the garden and eat worms, then stop. You can weep, wail, and gnash teeth. Enough already. And you can feel sad. Fine, then stop. There is a time and a place. We need to let go and feel sad, then you need to get on with it. You need to get on. Do you think that I loved knowing I was going to be told I had 2 years to live when I had the heart transplant? Did I ever tell you where they stuck me because they ran out of rooms the day after I got transplanted? Did I ever tell you where I went? They had no rooms and they stuck me in pediatric intensive care. That means that I had 3 days with a cardiac transplant, one of the first transplant at Shands Hospital, and I'm surrounded by dying babies. How do you like that for recovery? And so I'm looking at dying babies, crying nurses, crying parents, and I said to myself, what idiots would stick somebody here after a heart transplant? So I had a choice. Either get sucked in or say, doggone it all, And I know you're not going to, some of you won't like this, but I had an abide with me moment. I said, if you, whatever it is, I need some help here. I can't do this myself. And we do have control over our choices. You have a bad time, you call me. And you're going to start calling Michelle if you welcome her. You're going to start calling Besa. And we're going to put together a doggone good healthcare and pastoral care team. Why? Because that's what we're about. You have choices. You can sit at home and deal with it yourself, or you can deal with the rest of us and let us be a team to help each other out. Now, that is a goal for the future that starts now. How can we expand our caring for each other so when you say, okay, Kenneth gets up there and yells at everybody and drama about choices and do something, what do? We can back it up. We can back it up and say we've got a team that's there for us genuinely. And why? Because Besa has MS. Michelle has some basic physical issues that means she has to work from home. And your minister here has a heart transplant and his alcoholism, which means we know what we're talking about. So when you call, it's not academic. It's one wounded healer talking to another person to how can we grasp and work with you as you make choices to deal with what you are. Does that make sense to everybody? In terms of healing, practical, good, solid caring. I want to end on a quote and a real story. The quote comes from Leo Buscaglia, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his name wrong. When I talk about healing, I hope this really, really works. Too often, and by the way, I hope you know when I use the word we, I mean me too. I hope we understand that. Sometimes I think people have the idea when preachers speak, they're not included. I hope you all know me well enough to know that I do not separate myself from the rest of the group. So the we means all of us. Too often we underestimate the power of a touch. UU Miami has a marvelous woman who practices Reiki. She is a saint and an angel, and she's helped out so many people. I've met her. She is, and she uses the Reiki so well. Too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile. Oh, a smile, who knew? A simple smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which have the potential to turn a life around. Now a real story. Writing in Touchstones, Duana Markova was to tell the true story that happened to her. She was in the hospital and she said she was miserable. I was in the hospital. The one person whose presence I welcomed was a woman who came to sweep the floors with a large broom. She was the only one who didn't stick things in, take things out, and ask stupid questions. For a few minutes each night, this immense Jamaican woman rested her broom against the wall, sank her body into a turquoise plastic chair in my room, and she was the only one not trying to change me. On her next visit one day, she looked at me, and then she simply said, "You're more than the sickness in your body." I kept mumbling those words to myself. I'm more than the sickness in this body. I'm more than the suffering in this body. I remember her voice clearly. It was rich, deep, full like maple syrup in the spring. It's been 15 years since, and I'm fine, but I've never found her name, never found out who she was. But then she said one day to me too, she would not let go. You're not the fear in that body. You're more than the fear. Float on it. float above it. You're more than that pain. A Jamaican made all the healing in the world. You are more than the sickness. You are more than the pain. You are more than the fear. Amen. And Donald, Spirit of Life. I remember reading that there's the story of the loaves and the fishes in the Gospels, and the writer was saying we got it all wrong. Typical Northern Europeans were wondering how you multiply loaves and fishes. And the writer said it had nothing to do with loaves and fishes. It had to do with women and children were present. You missed it. You missed the whole picture. You're concentrating on the final little flows. It wasn't about loaves and fishes. It was Jesus was with women and children and everybody, and his meals included everybody. Typically, we get our culture gets in the way of seeing that he broke taboos. You had women, you had children, you had rich, you had poor, and you remember the story of Zacchaeus in the sycamore tree. He was the chief tax collector in Jericho, hated by everybody. And not only that, he was one of the citizens of Jericho, which made it worse. And what does Jesus do? He comes up to this guy who's sitting in a tree, says, dude, we need to have lunch. Everybody got mad. Everybody. It was just wild. He said, you know, you're concentrating on the Last Supper. Forget the Last Supper. Forget the Last Supper. Nobody actually remembered what was said. Concentrated on all the meals he had. John Dominic Crossan said, again, you missed the point. At All Souls, we offer a meal. It is not a divine mystery. It is not something someplace else. It is simple what have been done since wheat was first introduced in the Levant. A simple bread, simple cup, offering fellowship and healing to all. And if that doesn't work, you're still with us. You're still in the circle. We exclude no one. And after we would have bread and cup, and we would drop some bread on the floor or some wine and whatever, and we would still be a messy meal, which is what you do with meals. We would then hold hands. And so we symbolically hold hands now. And I'm asking you to repeat after me. Promise me you'll remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think. God didn't promise days without pain, laughter without sorrows, sun without rain. But the divine did promise strength for the day, comfort for the tears, light for the way. Now, Michelle is new here today, so she is not used to this. Somehow along the way, we adopted from the very beginning, and the word adopt is wrong, we stole. We absolutely stole. We didn't appropriate, we stole it. We stole from NA and AA the black chip. And the idea is, if you've got something, does anybody have to return a black chip? Now, if you're missing black chips, email me and I will send you lots. If anybody's has worked through whatever they need to work through, you hold up your black chip. All right, Danny worked through whatever it was, he held up his black chip. Now, if anybody is ticked off, you would come forward and pick up a black chip. If you've got one at home and there's something that's bothering you, you can't leave this morning unless you pick up a black chip and swear you're going to work on this. If you don't have one of these, let us know. We'll be glad to send you lots. A parting prayer, some wonderful parting music, and then don't leave as we have a chance to say goodbye to everybody. May the blessings of the divine be upon us in this hour and in the days to come, that we may seek the truth more devotedly, that we may think more independently, that we may reflect more searchingly, that we may know ourselves more completely, that we may forgive more quickly, we may pray more thoughtfully, we may act more courageously, we may live more nobly. And a great song for healing, Stand By Me. And now an Irish and Hindu blessing. May the road rise to meet you, and may the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall softly upon your fields. And when we meet again, may the divine in me greet and embrace the divine in you. Always. Amen. Now, before we go, let's say goodbye to everybody. Thank you all so much for being with us. Thank you, Michelle and Mark, for being with us. Michelle and I'll be on next time we gather. And thank you so much, all of you. Be safe, be well, be at peace. Amen.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all for having me today, and Mark as well.
Thank you.